over now.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very, very pleased to see the World Islamic Economic Forum here in London. Congratulations to the organizers. We had a fantastic session on education this morning, networking session, and I look forward to a great transnational session this morning. My own university, University of London, has a little bit of experience of transnational. We've been in the field of transnational for about 155 years now, and we're probably one of the biggest transnational providers in the UK. Transnational, of course, is a vital part of the higher education international landscape. It's a mechanism for higher education to cross borders, build capacity, give access, and raise standards. Yet to achieve all these things, we face many challenges and opportunities to take hold of. And we're going to, today, with our fantastic panel here before you, have a look at some of the social, some of the strategic, the technological, and the policy implications and issues to do with transnational education. In the order of speaking, the panel will be Ali Aslan Gümüsay, who's a doctoral scholar at the University of Oxford, a member of the Club of Rome, chairman of Zahnräder, and is researching the role of religion in management. He'll be followed by somebody who probably needs no introduction to most of you, Professor Sultan Abu-Orabi, who's Secretary General of the Association of Arab Universities, previously president of Yarmouk University, where I had the honor to meet him. He's a chemist, and he's a much awarded and recognized chemist in his own field and a leader of many societies to do with chemistry. He'll be followed by Sehreen Noor, who's the head of business development for Noodle Education. Noodle Education was voted by Forbes as one of the top 10 industry disruptors. Previously, Sehreen worked for the US Department of State, where she was part of the core team planning and executing President Obama's vision for global engagement. She's a prolific community builder, and she founded EdTech Women. And then finally, we'll have Professor Zaini Ujang, who's Secretary General of the Ministry of Education, Malaysia, and I believe known to pretty much everybody here in his own right. He was previously the University of Technology, Malaysia, and receiver of the very prestigious Moderator Award, and he's an environmental engineer and chairman of the Environmental Quality Council. So I believe that today we'll have an interesting discussion about transnational, where it's going, what the issues are. So over to the panel, and we're going to start off with Ali. So if I can invite Ali.
Good morning. Yes, okay. Yeah, thank you. Now I'm on. Good morning and salam alaikum. Education is changing, and with its change, institutions have to change too. The problem is that most of our higher education system is actually built like a Fordist assembly line. So we move from kindergarten to school to higher education, maybe towards retirement. Now, what we actually need, though, is a design system of education, an ecosystem of education, rather than this kind of assembly line from birth to death, almost like a lifelong learning system. Because we're all nomads. We're all traveling and staying at home and using the internet and technology to get education to us and to go to education. And actually, that's not something new. Ghazali was a nomad. He went to study for a couple of years, came back, and actually his probably most important experience, what he learned most from, was a robber, a thief. This thief interrupted the caravan he was in, and they tried obviously to collect gold. It was like, so give me some gold, give me your silver, and so on. And Ghazali was like, take everything I have, but don't take my bag. Don't take this bag. Like, there must be some really, really rich, like expensive things in this bag. So the thieves obviously asked, so what's in the bag? Well, and Ghazali said, all my notes I've taken during my higher education, like during my education experience, are in this. If you take it, you take all my education, all my knowledge away. And the thief said, knowledge which you can take away like this is no education at all. And Ghazali thought about it, went back and studied again, studied for his mind, his body, and his soul, and came back, changed from this experience. And I think nowadays, actually, our education system often only, it's almost like we learn for our iPad. Things which we can have in our iPad and so on, we learn. What do we remember from our schooling system, for example, about physics or chemistry, if we're not a chemistry professor? I certainly remember little about it. What is also important, though, is as nomads, we actually live on the one hand in a globalized world, on the other hand in a local environment. We're actually truly local. And I think we'll talk about MOOCs and just one sentence on it. I think MOOCs might actually be complements rather than substitutes to our education. Because on the one hand, obviously, we use the internet and so on, but can the internet actually substitute to the experience of learning, of being in the same room with people? I mean, we all are here now. Why are we here? Why don't we do this all online? We came here together, and this is the biggest weave ever. Why is it the biggest weave? Not because internet becomes better and better and we could stay home. We're actually traveling more. And we just discussed where everyone came from a couple of days ago. So we fly more rather than less. So death of distance, the world is flat, as Friedman said. Not really. Actually, we have innovation centers, we have educational centers at certain places. So we're living truly in a local world. And our education should be local too. What does it mean for our universities, our higher education strategy? Firstly, I think there is no one-size-fits-all solution. At Oxford, in our education program, in our executive education program, we actually created a scenarios program for university. And we tailored the scenarios program for this specific university. I think that's very important. There is no one-size-fits-all. And there's definitely no copy-paste from one place to another. What we need is then, as universities, to truly reflect what it means to be this specific university or this specific educational institution. Do we want to be at the forefront of research, the forefront of teaching? Can we actually decouple these two? And when I talk to academics, professors, they often say, I mean, research and teaching is so much interlinked. And then nowadays, I mean, with a new RAF exercise coming up next year, actually England just introduced social impact. So professors are now evaluated on their social impact as well. And that's this fourth commercialization of entrepreneurship coming to the system. What does that mean for us? That universities do also applied things. And I think applied research and entrepreneurship is no substitute, but again, a complement to what we've done before. Let me just go to the Zahnräder network, which the chairman mentioned. What we do at Zahnräder, actually, Zahnräder network is a German Muslim social incubator. And we try, in a way, I mean, we try to help Muslims, encourage and enable them in their projects, from an idea to the final stage of the projects. But another way, actually, what we create is knowledge transfer. We transfer knowledge vertically and horizontally, so from experts as well as amongst each other. And we call this an uncle doctor or an aunt doctor substitution system. In Germany, we have 4 million Muslims. The problem is that a lot of them are not that educated. They came as guest workers, and in a way, the problem for Germany is they invited guest workers, but humans came. So they are there now, but we don't have that many doctors in all kinds of fields. So what do we have to do? We have to substitute for the parsimony of people we have amongst each other. So we have to create a system where we learn from each other. And Zahnräder tries that. And I think universities, again, or higher education institutions, need to think what that means. How can they enable and encourage, create an accelerator or cultivator of education in their places? I think the key is we need to reconsider and rethink what education means, and reconsider and rethink what the role of institutions are. Education is not just for the mind. We are not just neck-up creatures. Education is for the body, the mind, and soul. And what it means then for the Muslim world, in a way, is if we copy and paste from, let's say, the West, and we copy and paste what was maybe good in the past, but not what is good in the future. We copy and paste a system which might have worked in an industrialization system, an industrialized age, but not necessarily in the design age. And I think we actually need to think that education should less be a science rather than art. For institutions, that means actually that they are not just, I mean, not an economic kind of perspective on institutions of shelter, labor, and capital, that's it. But actually, they are an ecosystem of change. They cultivate change. And I think that the concept of education as an art would do that. There's a nice quote saying, like, poetry has no survival value. And economists might say that, right? Poetry, art, no survival value. Well, the question, though, is it actually why survival is worth? So whilst maybe poetry and art has no survival value, it is why we live. So how do we then understand education as an artist system, as a humanities, as a non-science kind of system? And I think actually we can learn a lot from the Islamic history. And in a way, what we need to do is then our Islamic heritage, combine our Islamic heritage with, or the texts of the past with the context of the 21st century. Just quickly, I did an ethnography with a Muslim organization, and I found it very interesting how they transferred knowledge. Their knowledge transfer was really not just focused on the mind, it was focused on the body, mind, and soul. And I think that is really important. I think we can learn a lot from actually our own educational history and combine the two. I put Oxford up there, so this is Christchurch Hall, simply because it's nice dining in there, but also because I think Oxford, and some scholars actually argue that Oxford copied parts of the madrasa system back from Nizam al-Mulk and Andalusia. And when we have exams, for example, we wear robes, like the imams or sheikhs in mosques. And there are other things which actually resemble the madrasa system. So I think we can actually learn a lot also from our own past and then connect it to the 21st century of education. And with that, thank you very much.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, everybody. It is really my pleasure to be here this morning. I will be talking about higher education in the Arab world. Really, if we look at the higher education in the Arab world, it goes back to the 7th and the 8th century. Yesterday, the mayor of London asked a question about the oldest and the biggest city in the world during the 8th century, and it was Baghdad. And if we'll talk about the oldest university was established in the Arab world, it is the Zaytuna University in 734. And also Al-Qarawiyyin University was established 859. And then Al-Azhar al-Sharif University in Egypt, then Al-Mustansiriya University. Those 4 universities were established in the Arab world even before Bologna or before all the European universities that time. Therefore, our higher education system is very old. And during that time, as Mr. Ali mentioned, we have the madrasa system in the Arab world, and where we're teaching education and higher education even in mosques, in hospitals, in libraries, and also in schools. And during the 18th century, a lot of Arab scholars, they were sent by Muhammad Ali, the ruler of Egypt at that time, to Europe to translate a lot of books. Therefore, here we can talk about internationalization. And during the 8th century and the 9th century, a lot of European scholars, they used to come to the Middle East and study and translate and to get their degrees that time. And they were wearing that time al-amama and also al-aba'a, because they were studying in the Arab world. Therefore, education and higher education does not have a border between different countries. If we are considering the Middle East and North Africa and Europe, we are very close to each other and we have been working with each other. In the old days, yes, they will learn from us, and now we are learning from them. Therefore, there is exchange of ideas and information and different aspects of higher education between Arabs and Europe. But if we look at higher education in the recent history, until 1953, we had only 23 universities, we had only 13 universities in the Arab world. In 1964, all the presidents of the Arab universities met in Libya and Benghazi, and they have established the Association of the Arab Universities, where I am now proud that I am the president of this association. Nowadays, we have more than 260 universities under the umbrella of our association. Therefore, the number of universities has increased in the last 30 years, we have more than 600 universities in the Arab world. And we have more than 12 million students that are studying within those universities. Therefore, the number of students increasing so much in the last 30 years. Therefore, here we have facing many challenges. The first challenge in this regard, it is the quality assurance and the output of our programs in our universities. And in this regard here, we are taking care of this by our association. We have established the Arab Council for Quality Assurance and Accreditation. And we are working within the Arab universities, and we are working with our colleagues in Europe to enhance higher education, to improve the education in the region. And we have several books concerning quality assurance and accreditation. The second challenge facing our universities, it is the poor scientific research. We are still behind the European or the industrial countries when it comes to scientific research. The Arab countries, there are 22 countries, and they are composing 5% of the total globe, about 400 million, in relative ratio to 7 billion people in the globe nowadays. It is more than 5%, the Arab countries, they form from the globe. But our contribution to scientific research, unfortunately, is less than 0.5%. Therefore, what we are doing with our association, we just established last year the Arab Council for Scientific Research, and we are hoping that from this fund, we will increase and will enhance scientific research in our region. The third important challenges facing the Arab universities or the Arab countries, it is the brain drainage. Every year, we lose hundreds or even tens of thousands of our best students, the cream of the cream. They are studying in Europe or in the States. 54% of our Arab students who are studying abroad, they don't have the desire to come back home. And of course, there's a lot of reason behind this. The brain drainage, yes, it has a lot of impact in our life, in our social, our economy, our educational system. The reasons behind this, what we can see it now in the Arab Spring. A lot of students, they graduate, they don't have the jobs in their home countries. They try to find a better life. Lack of social life, lack of freedom in the Arab countries. And that's exactly what we have seen in the Arab Spring. And we have seen the influence of the Arab Spring during the last 2 or 3 years. When it comes to internationalization, we are doing a great job with internationalization. We are attracting a lot of students from abroad. For example, in Jordan, we have more than 5,000 students from Malaysia itself. They are studying in Jordan. And also they are studying in Egypt, they are studying in Morocco. Last year, last October, we had the first Arab-Malaysian conference on higher education, was held at USIM, at the University of the Islamic Studies in Kuala Lumpur, where we had more than 80 professors or presidents from the Arab world met with our colleagues and our brothers from Malaysia, and we discussed on the 3 days all kinds of aspects of cooperation and collaboration. The second conference of the Arab-Malaysian Conference will be held next month in Egypt and at Mansoura University. Also, we have established the first Arab Euro Conference on higher education, was held last May at Barcelona with the help of the European Universities Association. We met together and we discussed all kinds of aspects of collaboration between Europe and the MENA region. And the next conference, the second conference of higher education between Arabs and Europe, will be held next year in June 2014 at Princess Sumaya University of Technology in Amman in Jordan. And now we are working with our colleagues and brothers in Turkey. We are going to have the first Arab-Turkish conference next April in Istanbul. And also we have been discussing with our colleagues in Germany, where we are going to have the first Arab-German conference on higher education next October. It's going to be held at Chemnitz Technical University in Germany. Therefore, internationalization and collaboration, this is very important for higher education. If we look at Malaysia, Malaysia is becoming the hub for higher education in Southeast Asia. I think Malaysia is considered now number 10th in the world to attract a lot of students from abroad. In the meantime, Malaysia is sending tens of thousands of students every year abroad to study in all countries, just you mentioned it. The same thing with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia now, they have 170,000 of students they are studying abroad, mostly in the States and in Europe. Therefore, this is very important for the Arab countries. And here, with higher education system in the Arab countries and increasing the number of students, as I said, we have 12 million students in the Arab universities. Imagine those students, they are going to graduate within 3-4 years from now. What will happen after 8 years from now? Like 2021, we are expecting almost 50 million students will graduate. Do we have the jobs for them? 50 million jobs available for our youngsters? If we didn't have the jobs, then we are going to create a lot of problem within our Arab countries. And here we have asked our leaders to work hard to find jobs. And also we have asked our colleagues, the presidents of the Arab countries, that will open fields of interest to the Arab market, not to open sometimes special fields and they cannot find jobs. Therefore, employability is very important in our region. I think this kind of forum here, this is very important for the higher education in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, and as well as in Europe. Really, we thank you so much, and we thank the organizer to invite me to speak on higher education here. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. I want to thank Dr. Abu-Orabi and Ali for setting the stage. What we did was we listened to some of the things that are happening now and in the past. And what I want to do today is actually take you into what might the future look like for higher education, particularly talking about technology. For anyone who reads the New York Times, in the past year or so, there have been these huge proclamations about the coming of a democratization of education through something called the MOOC. Now, it's a bit of a funny word, but there are 4 components to it. It's called the Massively Open Online Courseware. It's massive because some of these classes can subscribe up to 200,000 people at one time. It's open, so it means anyone with internet connection can actually sign up on it for free. It's online, so it's actually professors speaking in front of a classroom and delivering the content completely in a virtual setting, wherever you are. And it's courseware, which means that they're actually classes coming from a university setting. So these are university professors who are teaching their classes and making it accessible to everyone. I want to offer that it's actually not, that we're not asking the right question. If we're talking about democratizing education, we're only halfway there. I think it's good that people can access these online classes, but access in and of itself isn't enough. And so what I want to talk about is the role of MOOCs in decoupling higher education from signaling of skills. I think what's really important is that people who acquire education can signal to employers that they actually have a skill set, that they can participate in the knowledge society, that they can create value in the economy, and they can contribute positively to something that's growing. There are a lot of really great, interesting things about MOOCs, and I can understand the hype. I mean, you hear stories about a girl in Pakistan, a 12-year-old girl from Lahore, who aced the MIT edX class on electronics. You hear the same thing about places where students don't have access to education. And it's a heartwarming story, but I fear that sometimes we get lost in this narrative because we so desperately want disruption in the higher education space. The thing that I think we should take note about MOOCs is that if we're talking about innovation, having a sage on stage format where someone sits on stage and it's actually being videotaped isn't actually innovative. What it's actually doing is getting someone like me who's standing on a podium and actually just opening it up to a broader audience. So in terms of pedagogy, it's not actually yet turning the tables. We are so eager. I think higher education needs disruption so badly, and the cost of education is so high right now that we so desperately want a silver bullet. And I think we have to be a little bit conscious about the fact that MOOCs are not yet a silver bullet. We are, first and foremost, we're in the testing phase right now. The past year and a half has seen 250% growth in MOOCs. It's just begun. We know, for example, that when MIT launched their course on electronics, they had 155,000 students sign up. Only 23,000 of those students got a question correct on the first exam, and only 7,000 actually passed the class. That's a passing rate of 4.5%. That's astonishingly low. The other thing that we know about MOOCs is that about 70% of the people who actually take MOOCs already have a bachelor's degree. So they're really attracting people who are there for the pursuit of knowledge. So we need to be asking ourselves these questions before we have a foregone conclusion. And I think we need to open up the discussion to think about the fact that we are in experimental phase. And I'll go back in a few minutes about why I think VC funding is really important in that. If we want to look at where MOOCs might go, I think a very important question is, what is the business model behind these? There are three main companies out there. One is Udacity, one is Coursera, and both of those were started by former Stanford professors. And there's also edX, which is a collaboration between Harvard and MIT. I think right now, because there's so much hype, because everyone, the New York Times, publishers, TechCrunch, particularly in the US, are very high on this idea of MOOCs, it's not that hard to get funding right now. edX put an initial investment of $60 million, but in a couple of years, that might be a different scenario. If you look into the future, what MOOCs are actually really doing is providing content. So there was a time, a couple decades ago when buying a textbook would have cost a couple $100s. So when I was in college, I spent at least $500 on just content and textbooks every semester. What these MOOCs are actually doing is making that content available for free. So one way to think about it is that they're disrupting the content publishing space. And so they may actually end up competing with textbook producers. But where I think that we really need to go is, and to really get innovative, is to see how MOOCs can primarily help people get skills, and secondly, prove that they actually have these skills to the employers. We have a couple of emerging solutions happening right now. There's a lot of creativity in the people who are behind the MOOCs. So for example, Coursera has worked with the American Council of Education to get 5 of their classes actually certified for credit. And so the ACE went back to their member organization, which is 1,800 colleges, and said, if a student comes to you with one of these classes, we recommend that you give credit. I think that's a great model. I think the limitation to that model is that it says that in order to signal to someone that you have skills, you have to work within the institutional framework. It has to be within higher education. I think the future actually is with companies like Degreed or Mozilla, which actually finds a way to assess skills that someone has taken and say, okay, this person knows HTML5, this person knows JavaScript, and is able to actually certify it. Because right now, the higher institutional model is very traditional. And a lot of the universities are having a bit of an existential crisis, and I'm sure my panelists will comment on that, about MOOCs. Bill Gates actually has made the point that he thinks that MOOCs are going to disrupt the middle tier of universities, where professors might get replaced by the content in MOOCs. And so there's some creative solutions coming out. So Academic Partnerships, for example, has actually created a consortium of universities where a student can take a class and get credited through that consortium. To grow, I think there's a couple of even more innovative solutions there. I think one is something called blended learning. So it's the idea of being able to have a MOOC, but also being able to have a professor or a TA in the classroom, and maybe being able to get accreditation. And there's a really great model coming out of Rwanda through an organization called Generation Rwanda, and they're testing that. I think other companies like Degreed and Mozilla need to get more support. And one of the reasons Why I think they're not getting a lot of support is the way that VCs actually fund a lot of companies. So in 2012, VCs gave $1.1 billion to edtech companies in the US. 30% of that went to 10 companies, many of which have already established their presence, including Desire to Learn or Lynda, which some of you may know of. The rest of the investments actually went to early stage seed investments, so Series A and pre-Series A. But there's nothing actually investing in that middle point. And there's no one investing across the spectrum of an ecosystem like Ali was saying. So what I think we need to do is actually invest in a series of companies to help them work together and grow, because the space is actually sometimes works on a zero-sum competition, that if I'm successful, then you can't be successful. And I think particularly in education, we need to move towards a more holistic view. And that's it. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Very good morning to all of you. I'm going to speak on mega trends in transnational education, a perspective from Malaysia. VC is not a venture capitalist, but vice chancellor in our context. So sometimes nomenclature is an issue here. I think there are 4 mega trends in this subject. The first one that I'm going to discuss about will be on global education and local approach. Then I'm going to talk about beyond Westland and MOOC, because you have mentioned about it. I'm just briefly talking about it. And global outreach. Let's go to the first point, which is global education and local approach. To get education is easy at the moment. The question is quality and investment. So it's very expensive for us to send our children here from Malaysia to United Kingdom in the past, but now it's getting more expensive. So what countries like Malaysia is doing at the moment is to have a global curriculum that's available in our country. And it must be vetted, it must be accredited. And this is very important. The quality is an issue, it's not the access. In many countries, they are still struggling to have an accreditation board that being approved or accredited by other accreditation bodies. Countries like Malaysia, say for example, we have MQA, Malaysia Qualification Agency, that well established, and this is the major thing in higher education in Malaysia. People come to Malaysia not only to study, but also to learn how we develop our MQA. Our doctors are well trained, and they are also able to practice here in the United Kingdom. Our engineers graduate from our universities, they can go straight doing PhD after first class degree in engineering programs in Malaysia to Imperial College, to Cambridge. So it shows that accreditation is an issue if you want to talk about transnational education. And the other point that I'm going to state here is on local funding. A lot of activities done on transnational education require a host country to fund them. And this is very important. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Malaysia in that context probably can be an example. In relation to globalization, I would like to see education not from the perspective of business, but if you can take business and as a platform, you can see that we need language translation, we need global compliance, we need business processes and data structures that can minimize our position, especially in complexity of the whole thing. I go through this very quickly. The second point, which is very important, it is no longer a Westland issue, that transnational education. We mentioned our brother, Professor Sultan, Abu-Orabi, mentioned about the presence of Malaysian or Muslim universities in many, many years ago. So actually it must be reiterated. And now the growing universities in non-Western countries are really a big thing. The growth pattern now is not in European countries or United States, but in Asia Pacific. And this is not only quantity, but also quality. Countries like Japan, China, Malaysia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, these are countries that I would like to put under beyond Westland in terms of transnational education. And we develop our local expertise as an alternative to countries in USA, Europe, and whatnot. So if you look into that, this is the global education global demand for UK higher education. You can see that people are going to stay at their country, host country, or their country, and they get British education. And this requires a lot of investment, and Muslim countries must do this. In the past, what we are trying to do is to send our children to that particular country if we have political issues, political problems, instability, and we have problems. We have 11,000 Malaysian students in Egypt at the moment, so I'm partly responsible to look after them, and it is a headache sometimes because of that situation. The student mobility in the future will be close to 4 million foreign students going abroad. We can see that countries like OECD will be the targets or the focus in this context. And this is what I'm going to talk today. This is very important. UK is the second in terms of getting international students from this market share, which is about 13%. United States, about 16%. But countries like Malaysia now having about 2.8%, which is number 9, ranked number 9, not number 10 in the world at the moment. But you can see that Egypt are all categorized under that very big portion, and this is mainly Muslim countries, Jordan, Arab countries in particular. Just some promotion. These are the quality that we are talking about. In the past, when people come to Malaysia, they are going for undergraduate programs. But now you can see that the trend is to go to Malaysia to get PhDs. The number of PhD students in Malaysia now is growing. Last year was about 42,000 students from only 4,000 in 2012. And 40% of these students are foreign students. And in particular, you can see that the number of 2,000 students studying in Malaysia, about 91,000 in 2011. This year is about 97,000, but we have another 2 months to go. Probably we can get 100 million, hit 100 million this year. Our target is 100,000, yeah, this year. I give you an example. Countries like Malaysia and Hong Kong and Indonesia are growing very fast in terms of quality. The quality in higher education can be reflected in many ways. One of them in ISI journal publication. I know that Prime Minister or former Prime Minister, you shouldn't know this. This is very technical. But this is an indicator of good university or good country. You can see that in a period of 5 years, 2007, after we implemented a new strategy called Strategic Plan for Higher Education in Malaysia, the increase in journal publication in Malaysia has been 320%. And this is the highest in the world. Compared to, say, for example, UK, they are stable at 6% a year. America is about 10% a year. China is about 195% a year. Sorry, for 5 years. This is number. What is important for us is we are already ahead of Singapore in terms of number of papers. So, yang amat bahagia Pak Lah, this is very important for us. You can show this around because this is during our time as Prime Minister of Malaysia that we started this policy. This is another highlight. This is the university that I worked for many, many years until recently. You can see that these universities changed from undergraduate focus to postgraduate focus. 53% of the students in 2012 was master's and PhD students. The number of PhD students in this very university close to 4,455. We stopped at 4,455 because it's easy for me to remember the number. But this year, exceed 5,000. So this is top 10 in the world in terms of PhD enrollment that we have. And this is not limited to UTM. Other universities, among research universities, we have 5 research universities in Malaysia. They are also between 3,000 to 4,000 students. This is postgraduate student number, international student about 5,000, and the ascending student abroad. And I stop with that. We are also filing about more than 500 patents a year from this university alone. So Malaysia, if you want to look at specifically, it's very good in generating higher education system, supporting industry in the context of not only research, but also intellectual property development. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much to the speakers. I think we've had 4 very interesting expositions there. Ali opened talking about the holistic balance between the body, soul, and the mind, and a sense of real exchange of knowledge on the world stage and some of the inequalities that are existing at the moment. Professor Sultan told us a little bit about the pride of history and the way that the Arab world took knowledge through a world that was in Europe in the Dark Ages and lost its ability and to take that knowledge through. And a host of initiatives that are going on at the moment to try and take forward the gap that's arisen in the Arab world in recent years, but is now hopefully catching up. Sehreen then took us into the future, but told us not to be blinded by the hype that we see in some of these developments, but to make sure that we concentrate on initiatives that are going to really get skills across to learners and signal to employers where those skills are, and that the future might be a blended future. And then Professor Zaini told us about some of the very exciting things that are happening in the Malaysian context and the way that some of the major growth, both in quality and quantity in higher education, is taking place in Asia. And something that he said that I think is a very important way in to understanding transnational education, the concept of global education with a local approach. And I think this could be a key for us to think about lots of things in relation to globalization, because right through all of these expositions, we could feel the advantages of globalization, but also the challenges of an equitable flow of knowledge around the world, and an equitable exchange between the communities, and how to make that knowledge relevant in a local context. What I'd like to do now is just to ask a couple of quick questions to the panels and get them to talk about a couple of these issues, and then hand over to the audience to come in with questions as we go forward. So what I'd like to ask the panel is to think from the heads, from the perspective of heads of institutions, and ask each of you, what advice would you give to a head of an institution that is now developing an international strategy involving transnational education? How is that going to be relevant to this changing world that we see? How is it going to be equitable in terms of ensuring knowledge flows around the world? And how is it going to bridge the gap between globalization and localization? So I'll take it in a slightly different order. And I'd like Professor Sultan, if you wouldn't mind telling me a little bit, what advice would you give to heads of institutions in this respect?
Thank you, Tim. Actually, before I took my position as president of the Association of the Arab Universities, I was president of 3 different universities in Jordan, Yarmouk and Tafila and Erbil. And being a president, I think it is very important usually to have a strategic plan for your future. What do you want to do within your university? How increase the quality of teaching, quality of research, and how you increase the quality of the staff. One of the things what we have been doing in Jordan is to send a large number of students to study abroad, especially to Europe and to the States, to finish their education and to come back. Those scholars, once they finish, There will be the seed professors who are doing the business of teaching and doing research. This is one point. The second thing that you have to increase and to enhance student mobility and also staff mobility between Jordan or the Arab countries and outside. Nowadays, we are increasing the mobility of our students to Europe through Erasmus or through Tempest or through, especially with the German, with that, Alexander von Humboldt, the DFG, and things like this. This is very important to us. You bring international students, for example, to Jordan. They study over there, and you're sending the Jordanian students abroad. And this is very important. Those students, when they come to Jordan, they become ambassadors of their nationals, like from Malaysia, from Saudi Arabia, from Brunei, from Indonesia, even from Europe. They will become ambassadors in Jordan. And once they go back, they act as ambassadors in their home countries. This is very important. And exchanging and collaborating in research between outside, this is very important, between our scholars, our researchers, with the Europeans or our colleagues from Southeast Asia, especially with Malaysia. This is very important what we have to do. And also collaboration on research. As I said in my talk, research and education does not have borders. We have to work together. We have to have research proposal together. This is very important for transnational education, my friend, Mr. Gore.
Thank you, Professor Sultan. So, greatly increase the amount of mobility inwards and outwards, I think. Sehreen, can I ask you to comment from your sort of future-gazing perspective? What advice would you give to institutional heads?
I would say two things. I think it's important to look at where the school is at that time. I think first and foremost, it's looking at the curriculum and seeing if it has the right mix of social sciences, humanities, and harder sciences. I think it's actually really important to embed those values directly into the content. So if you look at the IB curriculum, for example, at the high school level, I think there's a lot of sort of globalization type ethics and ethos already embedded in there. So when you're looking at high costs, I think fundamentally you need to look at the curriculum. I think for someone who wants to start employing technology, I think the first question should be, how can I help my students co-create with students from other places around the world? And then work backwards to find the technology that works. So an example that I'm thinking of is not particularly in the higher education space, but outside, which I think could be brought in, which is this idea of hackathons or Startup Weekend, which I know is very popular in New York, and it basically brings people together over a common project where they can co-create, and that can easily be facilitated by technology. So I'd ask the question first and bring the right technology after.
Thank you, Sehreen. Yeah, and I very much like the idea of co-creation, where different parts of the world are pooling their ideas together and making something happen from a diverse perspective, but also the bringing in of the recognition of expertise and knowledge where it is. So looking at the sort of ethical approach of IB is a good starting point, I think. Dr. Zaini, your advice to institutional heads?
Mr. Chairman, free advice is normally bad advice.
Thank you.
This is my opinion, I think. There are two things. We should emphasize on quality rather than quantity. So I'm very worried about the number of foreign students in Malaysia. Are they a quality student or they're merely quantity in numbers? Therefore, we changed from our KPIs from just numbers into the number of students at postgraduate level in Malaysia. This is what we are trying to do. So we monitor the flow of postgraduate to Malaysia rather than just simply any students. So undergraduate for us is not bringing us, we cannot leverage on undergraduate students. They are paying very cheap fees, tuition fees, and they are competing with local students, which is needed in Malaysia to get more access to Malaysian students to our higher education. But at our graduate level, postgraduate level, we can co-exist, co-create with these students to develop intellectual property of the country, more scientific penetration in scientific journals, and a few other aspects. The second point, which is very important as well, is concentrating on the outputs rather than the inputs. I would like to share this, and this is what we are trying to do in the near future. In terms of inputs for research in the world, UK ranked number 24, and Malaysia ranked in terms of ranking for inputs for research, it means that how much money you put in for research, especially scientific research. Malaysia is ranked number 24, UK is ranked number 28. But in terms of output of research, UK is ranked number 2, and Malaysia is ranked number 48. So it means that there are a lot of inefficiency in our system. We are concentrating more on the inputs. Ministers, policymakers like me, we are concentrating on how much money we spend this year for research rather than what is the outcome of the research. So please concentrate on outputs rather than inputs.
Thank you very much, Professor. I totally agree that concentrating on outputs is obviously going to be much more important to us than concentrating on inputs. I also assume that your advice was not free, because it seemed to be pretty good advice to me. Ali, yes. your advice to institutional leaders.
Sure, I'm hesitant to call it no advice, so then my opinion. I guess I would say consider education to be lunch, but not a free lunch, I guess. And I know it's dangerous to talk about lunch at this time. But I mean, lunch as in having like a starter and like a main and a dessert. And education actually is then this kind of a lifelong learning process. And I think in a way we could look at newspapers and see how they subscribe. I mean, how you can subscribe to newspapers. Why can't we subscribe to education, to have like different levels of our educational sphere of life, different kind of inputs, like a newspaper. So that's like then on the timeline. On the other hand, obviously a lunch also has meat, like a nice halal chicken, for example, some rice and some vegetables. So what does that mean? And I think we need to combine different ingredients from different places. So why not say you're in university somewhere in the middle of a country, and your students can, like when they would cook a lunch, they can pick different things. So they take the economics class and the arts class and so on from the university, so they pick there and put it all together themselves. And then they pick elsewhere from other places, like MOOCs. So they say, oh, we don't have maritime sciences at our place. Why can't I take the maritime science class online? So I pick 5% here, 10% there, and build my own education curricula. And I feel empowered and encouraged that I am the one who actually designs my own program. And I choose what I want and then bring it all together. So I would say on the time horizon, as well as in one point in time, I think we need variety, like a lunch.
Thank you, Ali. I like very much the reference to lunch, although, as you say, it is a bit dangerous. I think perhaps you and Sehreen should spend some time together plotting the future of education. I think you come up with some very interesting ideas. I do like the concept of subscribing to education and education being a part of your life right throughout the life. So I think that's very important and goes back to your more holistic ideas that you mentioned earlier on. Right, over to the audience. And I do hope that you're not thinking about lunch and you are thinking about the sorts of penetrating questions you might ask. I think you've got a sense for where the speakers are at. So please feel free to quiz the panel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tim. I'm Dr. Ghazali from Malaysia. I look at a topic from a different perspective. When you talk about transnational education, given the world problem today, globalization, and the challenge of management of countries, the economic opportunities for all nations. Just now we heard from Tun Abdullah, who mentioned the wisdom of linking education and civilizational renewal. My point to all of you, from England right to Malaysia, will not there today be wisdom among us to develop from the great civilization that we have, which is the West, Islam, India, China, a common universal framework of how to develop the thinking man and the good citizen. Today, with technology, which MOOC styles, like you're from, lady from America, we know for a fact that Harvard has admitted. In 2009, they have developed executive without a soul, and that explains the crisis that has inflicted modern capitalism. Our common challenge today is that with technology, we have now got democratization and accessibility throughout time never seen in mankind. My proposal to all of you here, whether in England or Malaysia, would not be possible that education today become the determinant to create a new civilizational renewal. Today we know in Malaysia we have a professor who says education is about bringing meaning to the soul. It is Professor Syed Naqib Muhammad Altas who wrote about secularization and Islam. My point today, when we are in London, we are meeting the civilization of the West and the rest, which is China, India, and Islam. My challenge to the panel is that we go beyond techniques of education, we go to the philosophy of life, the purpose of education, because, Madam Sehreen, you can learn and get knowledge as information. Our common challenge is to have the thinking and virtuous man. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ghazali. I'll collect another couple of questions, and then I'll ask various panel members to respond to those. There's one over here, please. Have we got the... There's 1, 2 here. Perhaps the gentleman at the back, and then this gentleman. So we've got 2 questions here. We'll take one after the other.
Thanks very much indeed. I'm Richard Bourne from the Ramphal Institute in London and the Institute of Commonwealth Studies at London University. My question to the panel is to do with the cost of transnational education for students. There's been talk of the MOOCs this morning, and at the moment it's quite costly for students to go from one country to another for their education. Do you see the cost of the online education services coming down in the future, or do you see things being totally free for some students? How do you see the cost, and might it alter according to the level of income in different countries or of different families? I'd like to look at the question of student cost in the future.
Thank you, Richard.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Ali Khurshid from Reading University. My question to the panel is, it is a very impressive figures that PhD graduates are growing in the Middle East and in the Far East, superseding the West, which is UK and America in particular. But the West, UK and Europe and America, they always have projects, large projects, to house all the PhD students, graduates, and to accommodate them in a large technological development. I wonder what the program is for the, especially Asia and Malaysia, for the graduate of PhD students. And I hope you don't fall in the trap what's happened in Egypt over the last, say, 20 years, when they have over number of BA undergraduate students who, when they finish, they don't have any jobs or nothing to house them. So what they had to do is to have all the BA graduates to go back as a labor and as a taxi driver. And this is a trap which is, I hope we can avoid. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. I think over here we have a question.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Khalid Abdul Wasi from Bermuda, and I have basically 2 questions. One I would send to Sultan Abu-Orabi regarding the issue of brain drain. And I would like to relate my question to what happened in the 16th century, 15th century Europe, which effectively had an sort of migration of capital in developing of the West, and then in investing in that, they were able to take people who were essentially the lower economic class and gave opportunity. Now, my point here is this, that perhaps the fact that there are people who are going overseas in the West and not coming back is also following the economic investment model of what exists in the Middle East. Perhaps if we were to invest, like it were in the case in 16th century Europe, overseas into companies, into developing and infrastructure developments around the world, that your students that are going outside and appear to be a brain drain to your country can actually be an asset to your development. That's one point.
Thank you. Have another point?
I have one other question.
Oh, okay.
Beginning
I'll
with,
ask you to be brief if you can, because
I'll
we
try
have
to
a
be
lot.
brief. Yeah. Well, following on with Mr. Ghazali's question, essentially the mandate that the Quran gives to us as Muslims, and actually to the world, is based in Surah As. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal as innal insana lafi khusr. It didn't say, oh, you who believe. It's to all of humanity. So we can take the axiom from there that when it comes to education, when it comes to humanity, the mandate that the Quran gave was not a mandate to a certain sect of people. It was a mandate to all of humanity. That we come together, discuss what's true, rationalize and reason together. So the mandate is there. And when you couch that into the issue of civics, and politics, all of it, essentially our mandate is there. It didn't come from Jeffersonian. It's already mandated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll pause for a second. Thank you very much for those fantastic questions. What I'm going to ask the panel to do is to consider those 4 questions. So we have from Dr. Ghazali, from Richard Bourne, from Dr. Ali Khorshid, and Khalid Abdul Wasim. The first one will start off with Dr. Ghazali's, which is about the thinking man, bringing the philosophy into education and so on. I'd like to ask Ali if you'd like to lead on this question.
Yeah, so I very much agree that maybe on the content side, I think we should focus our education more and more on akhlaq and adab. So education is not just for learning it, but actually for using it, for practice. And as I mentioned with the body, mind, and soul kind of picture, I think we should have on the content side, education moving more towards a holistic approach. On the process side, I did some research on academic entrepreneurship, and I asked the professor in Oxford what he thinks about fundamental research. And I really, really loved his story. He said, imagine us all being in one room. And I'm, let's say, a chemist, and I research that corner. And you, another chemist, you research that corner. Now, one of us might find gold, right, like some kind of knowledge. But we both equally contribute to this, actually. Because I know you cover this corner, that's why I can cover that corner. So I think on the process side, actually, we need diversity in education. So rather than saying West versus Rest, there's a competition, it could actually be that we need diversity. I mean, when we go to the supermarket, we don't just want one thing which wins, like what someone thinks is the best quality milk or something. We want variety. Why not having variety in education and then see where this moves to? So on the content side, I would say more akhlaq, more adab. And on the process side, variety in education is actually good, rather than competing towards a monopoly of educational views.
Thank you very much. Does any of the other panel members want to comment on Dr. Ghazali's?
Yeah, it's very important. I wrote a book on the soul of higher learning recently, and it was published in Malaysia. It was very well received, and the key arguments in my book was on why we call it higher learning, higher education. We don't call it universities or just merely higher institutions. Because at that level, we should talk, discuss, and deeply engage in the higher level of learning. It should go beyond mechanics. We should get the real meaning of life through higher education. But Dr. Ghazali is very interesting point. The question is how we want to make it in a system that we have. So sometimes policy statement is very easy. Philosophical statement is a bit difficult to understand. And for our general public to understand education from that perspective is a real challenge. I think Tan Sri Wan Zahid mentioned that in his book when he and his team work on PSPTN, Plan Strategic Higher Education in Malaysia.
Thank you, thank you. Let's move on to Richard Bourne's question about will the costs of transnational go down or not? Sehreen, any thoughts on that?
Sure. It's a really important question. I think the cost of online education will definitely go down. And we're just in the experimental period, so by sheer economics, it'll open up. I think that in a lot of different countries, what happens is in higher education, the money follows the institution. So the money goes to the university. There could be another possibility in the future where the money would actually follow the student. So imagine a student who could actually have their own fund of $20,000 and decide how they would want to spend it. And if they wanted to spend it on a subscription model to Coursera, that could be a very interesting option in the future because it actually gives autonomy back completely to the student and doesn't require them to go to a brick and mortar institution. I think the second thing is that outside of higher education, it's really important to see where money is actually being spent. And there's been a lot of research that signals that money going into teachers actually has better student outcomes than money going into technology. So, for example, the US is doing very well in terms of having technology in the classrooms. It's not 100% yet, but our student outcomes are lower than in Finland, which have less technology in the classrooms. So we need to actually see what part of education is getting the return and try to fund it that way.
Thank you. Anyone else on the costs?
It depends on the model of education we have in that particular country. For countries in Scandinavian region, the model is after the government to pay the expenses of education. So for the students, it is almost free, but you have to pay the tax. I think it must be coupled together with the policy of the country in this. In Malaysia, say for example, we pay almost 95% of the cost of education in Malaysia. So thanks to the government, stick to that policy at the moment. So students from other countries in the world studying in Malaysia, they are heavily subsidized by Malaysian government.
Thank you. Moving on to Dr. Ali Kashif's, Professor Sultan, would you like to give us a comment on whether when we produce PhDs, how do we make sure there's somewhere for them to go in terms of their career structure and progression?
Well, once again, about the cost, I think it is very important. Everything has a cost. Everything has a price. In the Arab universities, the cost varies from $400 per year for a student in some countries like Sudan, Yemen. It goes to almost $100,000 per year in some of the Gulf countries. For the PhD programs abroad, in UK or in the States or in Canada or in Malaysia, yes, the students, nowadays they are paying a lot of money. If we look at the British system 30 years ago, it was free for education. Now the British universities, without the international students, without the fees and the tuitions, I think most of them, they will be closed nowadays. Therefore, education is becoming an investment. It is a commerce now. This is very important to keep going on the research and the teaching methodology. In Egypt, Professor Ali asked, we have a lot of students, yes, they are studying, and they are working as a taxi driver or working just in any job. That's true. This is one of the disadvantages in education in our system in the Arab countries. Most of the students who are graduating from high school, they go to a university. But we don't have much vocational programs in our Arab countries. This is very important. We have to consider this. Vocational training, this is important to most of the Arab countries nowadays. And the gentleman here was asking about the brain drain. It is, yes, it is a brain drain for us, but it is, again, for other countries who are using those graduate students abroad. Let us have a strategic plan, for example, within a small department. We are planning to have 10 professors in the future. We are planning on them. But once they go abroad to study in the States or in Europe, and if they will not come back, what will happen to your plans? Therefore, it is a problem, yes, for the previous country, and it is an assist or a gain for other countries.
I think Mr. Abdul Wasim's point was that even when students are abroad, they can still be an asset for their own country. Yes. And we've seen some evidence of this in the sort of bringing of the Silicon Valley back into creating Bangalore and so on, and getting all of that startup going. So there is some evidence of that. Would anyone else like to comment on either on the PhD or the brain drain issue? Ali?
Yeah, sure. So I think we often conceive education as a consumption kind of process where we open the mouth and we are spoon-fed. And I think that kind of needs to change. We need to teach our students that they're there actually as producers rather than as consumers. So they come and learn and are active. And that means actually that we as teachers should speak less and let them speak more, let them be more practical. And I think then, rather than they looking for a job afterwards, they can create their own jobs. I mean, obviously there's one way, as Professor Sultan mentioned, having some kind of like a vocational training, which we need. And Germany is an interesting example of a national innovation system where it works quite well. On the other hand, obviously, and America actually might be a role model, like creating a kind of an entrepreneurial culture where students say, I'll do something on my own. And I think then for that, we actually need to change our education so that then the students don't feel that they have a right for a job, but they feel that they have an obligation to create their own jobs.
Thank you. And would any of the panelists like to comment on the last question about the mandate from the Holy Quran for all of humanity? Any comments on that, or we leave that as a comment?
Understood.
Okay, so we'll move. I think we've got time for 2 more questions. I'm really sorry. I know there's a great. We've got this gentleman here and this lady here. So should we start here?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I would like to draw your attention that knowledge is one thing, language is another. So now we are talking about the graduate, postgraduate. In knowledge, we have no dispute. But what about the language? اسمح لي يا دكتور سلطان، أنتم ستخرجون ماليزيين من عندكم بالآلاف وموجودون الآن بالمئات، لكن أنا كمحاضر في الجامعة، my name is إسماعيل عبد الحليم، وجدت أن مستوى اللغة العربية let alone المستوى اللغة العربية الفصحى ضعيفة. وأرجو منكم كرئيس الجامعة أن تخططوا تخطيطاً علمياً لغوياً ليكونوا طلابنا راجعين إلى ماليزيا فصيحين باللغة العربية الفصحى والعامية. هذا واحد. وبالنسبة للعالم الأخرى، مثلاً في ماليزيا we have 400 or 4,000 graduates from abroad studying in Malaysia. We teach them in English, but we are not English. I'm not sure what English we are using, either BBC language or US language or Malay Chinese Malay language. So I think doctor from Malaysia must have do something to improve the quality of the lecturer who are Malay teaching in English. And the same goes to Western universities. They give a PhD to students, yes, it's no question, it's good. But as far as language is concerned, we have some problem with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And this is going to have to be the last question, I'm afraid. I'm
thank
really
you.
sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and distinguished panelists. I'm Sharifah Noor Kamsia, an innovation and nuclear advocate from Malaysia. I have 2 comments, one for Professor Ali Aslan and the other for Sultan T. Abu-Orabi. With reference to Professor Ali Aslan's slide just now, in which you showed for the university, the focus is on research, administration, and commercialization, I'd like to recommend that one more slide that you would be good to put in is innovation. Because you had also mentioned that in Oxford or in UK, they're going to assess the professors according also to social impact. Because largely previously, when we look at innovation, it focused only on technological innovation, moving products, processes to the marketplace. But now, even in the SAID Business School, Oxford, they also have come up with something called social innovation. That means innovation is not just for business per se, not for economics, but also for social benefits. Second, and I'm pleased to inform ladies and gentlemen here, my book on women and innovation, the UK experience, is going to be launched this afternoon at 3:30 to 4:30 during the media conference in level 3. Secondly, I'd like to revert back to Sultan T. Abu-Orabi, in which you shared your concern about the brain drain. And I think you should not be too worried about this, because I think in Islamic countries, you must have two-pronged strategy. One, to build the industry within Islamic nations, and this must be the new sunrise industries such as IT, biotech, because this is what is bringing China and India into the new wave of economic growth. So maybe in the Arab countries, we should look at that. And secondly, about the brain drain, do not worry, because please follow the same model as India, because they have a lot of Indians, due to economic, which was quite low previously, they've moved to Silicon Valley and all that and built for themselves great businesses, and they actually stayed in US. But as we all know, whatever nationality we are, we always have the loyalty back to our country, no matter in which part of the world we are. So I'd like to recommend for you, Professor, to gather these brain drains, so-called brain drains overseas, bring them back to be advisors and strategists for the Islamic countries. Because in India, these NRIs, they develop strategy to build the venture capital business. They also become the business angels for the local Indians to build up their IT businesses. So I hope this will help you.
Thank you for that very eloquent comment. I know this gentleman won't let me escape without, but I can literally give you only 2 seconds, please.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. But I came from Horn of Africa, maybe the destination that I came, for the sake of that, you will give me more.
3 seconds, but two of them have gone.
Thank you. My name is Mr. Mohammed Omar Dalha from Somalia. I used to be a lecturer from Somali National University before the Civil War. But now I'm a member from Somali Parliament and Arab Parliament. And also I was first Deputy Speaker of Somali Parliament and Minister of Social Affairs.
So your comment.
But so after that, allow me first of all to thank the WIF organization, because the first time that we are getting invitation and getting a chance like this to attend and say at least something about what is happening in Somalia and the problems that we are having. Really, when everybody here is Somalia, he is remembering piracy and terrorists and all these problems created by lack of education, and the problem which is without law and order that we were staying for 22 years. Really, today, the new government campaigning how to restore hope, the education. We never forgot some countries, really, those are extending us scholarships and also helping us the educational programs such as Sudan, Egypt, and also Turkish. Last time they have given us 2,000 scholarships one time. And even our students, we know some of them, they are learning in Malaysia and in Europe countries, those who have been fled from the civil war. But now the problem we are having is two: external problem and internal problem. The internal problem that we are having, there is no enough schools and higher education in the country, because all the universities, institutes, and most of the schools has been devastated by the civil war. And you got some universities has been changed into military camps. So this is one of the problems that we are having. While we are talking about the external problem, our students, they are graduating from different continents. So each group, tomorrow they will come back with a new culture that we don't know what it will be. Somalia, it is a Muslim country. whether they will be affected by Buddhists or something like that, or others, or even the competition of the religion sometimes, it is affecting us more than everything, because everything which is coming as a problem to Somalia now, it is from the foreign actors. So for the sake of that, what is the program for the forum like Somalia, to help them and to stand near of them, at least through peace education?
Thank you very much for your comment, and we very much appreciate it. Thank you. I'm afraid I have to draw it to a close. We're already over time. I'll take those last three as comments. I don't know if the panel wants to have a very quick one-word farewell or 2 words very, very quickly from each panelist. Dr. Sultan?
The first question from Dr. Ismail concerning the language. I think you are right. I agree with you completely. Even in the States of America, the English language within colleges and universities becoming very weak nowadays. In some countries, they are using different languages. Even in Germany nowadays, if you are a PhD student, you will write your thesis not even in German language. You will write in English language. Yes, we are concerned about Arabic language for our brothers who are coming from Malaysia, from Brunei, from Indonesia. We try our best, and we hope that the proper language will be taught at those universities. The lady who raised the question about brain drain, once again, I agree with you completely. We are doing what you have suggested. We are in the process of organizing a conference for our Arabs, elite professors who are working abroad in the States or in Europe, to bring them back and to use them, to get help of them as advisors in our universities. You are right. But we cannot really compare India to a small country like Jordan or Lebanon, because in India you have millions and millions of people. You want to find jobs from outside. But for us in Jordan or in Lebanon or in Tunisia, once they will not come back, they will create a problem within our society, because we will not have the educated, the well-trained professors who we are in bad need for them. My brother from Somalia, yes, I agree with you. I think education is very important. هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون? That's very important. We have to teach our kids in order to improve their life daily. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sultan. Any of the other panelists, final word? Professor Zaini, a very brief one, please.
Okay. For education to move forward, I think within Muslim countries, I think what is very important for us to understand is to have a very clear performance indicators. And it should not be performance indicators similar to the one in private sectors or in commercial entities. It should be encompassing growth of many things, personal growth and economic growth as well. I specifically mentioned about this because if you look into statistics, Muslim countries have reached a certain level. To move forward, we must have a proper key performance indicators that really reflect the future for the country to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sehreen, any last word?
Sure. There's going to be a lot more technology that comes out of the education technology system, and I would say just by virtue of the diversity in the room and the context, we should be healthily skeptical that, there is no silver bullet solution, but that the idea is that how can we, ask what the problem is first, see how the technology fits, and adapt it to the local context.
Thank you. Thank you. Ali?
Yeah, so 2 comments. One to the lady. I would say you're right, innovation should be there. As an academic, we love parsimony, and it's always a balance between parsimony and explanatory power. So, but innovation is, it's actually in all 4 categories. And then a comment to the gentleman over there. I studied a bit of Fusa, and I think it changed a lot about my life. Just things like Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in, knowing that the ka is a personal pronoun speaking to God. So I think we need to embrace our own heritage, our own history, and link it to the 21st century context. So text context bring us, inshallah, forward.
So it only remains me to thank you as an audience for fantastic questions and fantastic level of engagement, and also for speaking from your heart. And to thank also the panel in the usual way. Can we thank the panel, please?